I'm just, it's just going live on YouTube.
It's tense, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Wish I had some ice cream and perhaps a few sweets, revels preferably.
A bit of popcorn, I think.
Listen for the cigarette lady to come round at half time.
Yeah.
So we have 15 attendees who've joined us that your panelists can see on the attendee list in front of them.
Fine, okay. Well, I think we ought to make a start, really. It's just gone 7. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Anita Collier, Mayor of Frome. Thank you for joining us all tonight. Please bear with us if there are any technical issues. You know what it's like with Zoom. But these minutes will actually be posted on our website as usual for those of you who want to catch up. Just a few housekeeping points this evening. All participants will automatically be muted unless they're asked to speak. We have 19 attendees registered this evening to come and join us. And please could I ask attendees to pose questions through the Q&A board, if you would, please. That makes it much easier for us to manage. You won't be on video, but you can be seen in name by all members and staff in the meeting. Attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record if their question is answered. I'll take councillors' questions first when we come to that section. And councillors, if you wish to comment or ask a question, please physically raise your hand. And if attendees wish to ask a question, please, as I say, use the Q&A box. You might just see a blue hand in order to wave, but I'm afraid it won't be functioning. I just wanted you to know that for information this evening. After that, I'll be asking Rachel for any questions that appear on that Q&A board. And of course, we need to make sure that all councillors raise your hands to vote when required and keep it there physically until the vote's been recorded by Paul and Laura. Paul will clerk as normal. Laura will take the minutes and manage the slides. And Rachel and Sarah will manage the questions board and participant meetings. So we'll start the meeting with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence, a declaration of councillors' interest and approval of the minutes. So do we have any apologies for absence this evening?
Yes, we have from Andy Rintmore.
Okay, thank you. And councillors' interests? Anyone would need to declare an interest? Lizzie?
Just to declare on item 6, which is the transport and energy side, that I'm director of FRECO, which gets a mention at that point.
Lovely, thank you. And Richard?
Obviously missing links, I am the chair, and also Friends of River Frome, I'm a trustee.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations? Okay, so then we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting on the 20th of May. If I guess you've all seen the minutes by now. Can I have a proposer for those minutes, please? Rich and Sarah? Just a second, thank you. All in favour?
That's unanimous.
That's unanimous, thanks Paul. So we've got to the stage where we have any questions now. So I'll ask first of all questions from councillors and then come on to members of the public. So, and the councillors will be taken in order. So Frome Town councillors, do you have any questions you want to raise at this stage? Rich?
Yeah, just a question, it's not answerable possibly tonight, but garden waste collections. My garden waste has gone out for the last 5 weeks. It's been collected twice and not this week. So I'm not moaning as such because I understand that there are difficulties, but I would quite like to find out when it's going to go back to normal.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who can pick that up here?
Yeah, well, I'll take that up.
Paul, thank you. Any other questions? No, okay. Are there any councillors from Mendip District Council who'd like to ask a question?
Rachel, is there any?
Not that I can see.
No.
And anyone from Somerset County Council? I don't think so. Okay, so are there any members of the public who would have posed a question on the Q&A board at this stage? Rachel, do we have any questions at this stage?
No, not at this stage.
Not at this stage. Okay, thank you.
Richard,
All right, that leads us on to item 2, which is a verbal update from Rich Ackroyd about the current state of the Missing Links project. So over to you, Richard.
Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen if I can. Let's see what happens. Right, have you got my screen?
No.
Not quite at the moment.
Well, almost there.
Oh, yes.
There we are.
So what have you got? Is that you're seeing what? Right, it's this I want, isn't it? There we go. 2 seconds while I do the biz.
The joys of technology, eh?
Okay, I'll keep this brief. Basically, Frome's Missing Links. There's a picture of Anna riding the first phase of the cycle path.
Rich, we can't see anything, I don't think.
Oh, right, okay. How do I make that work?
Or am I the only one that can't see anything?
Something's coming, it's just white.
Anything either.
Oh, God. Hang on.
Rich, if you stop sharing and then start sharing again, it might pick it up a second time.
Rich, do you want me to share my screen instead?
I've changed it slightly, so let's give it a right. So let's start again. If I try share screen, then I've got an option of whiteboard or Zoom. So
Is it on your whiteboard or on Zoom? The presentation.
Be on Zoom because I'm going to just use it on.
Select Zoom.
Okay, let's see what happens. Sorry about this, folks. Right, let's see if we get it now. No. Might have to use your version then. You see that?
No, we just see
All
Zoom.
it says is Zoom, Rich.
If you stop sharing, I'll have a go.
Okay, that's disappointing. Never mind. Stop share.
Laura, you can have a crack, yeah? There we are. Oh.
Okay, so this is an early version, but it doesn't really matter. It's good. So if I just say next slide, Laura, when you're ready. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, Frome's Missing Links. There's Anna. We go to the next one. What I'll say is, for those who don't know, Frome's Missing Links was formed as an independent CIO in 2010. We've got 6 trustees. We've got about 4 or 5 key helpers who come along to meetings regularly. Then we've got about a dozen or so Friday crew volunteers who do all the physical work, the practical work out there. And we've got about 2,000 supporters in the town. So we're quite well respected. And this is just a quick update on where we're at the moment. So if I could have the next slide, please, Laura, that'd be great. Okay, we exist really to create pathways, to create easy access for people cycling, walking. That's our main aim, not just in Frome, but around Frome, so connections to and from Frome. We've got various links with other partnership projects. For example, we've worked with Adventure and Frome Town Council at the moment. We work with Sustrans, Mendip County, particularly at the moment, see how we can spend some of their money. Next slide. Next slide, Laura. Or do I have to do it?
Again, I moved it on. Do I need to move on again?
Yes, please. I've still got the same slide, interestingly.
It's not changing at all.
Is it not? Okay, that's good.
Can we just give up on the slides, Rich, and you just talk?
Well, I wanted to show you some photographs, basically. There we go. Right. Next slide. Whiz on. I'll cut the crap. Okay, so this is where we're working at the moment. We have a planning application in for what we call phase 3. So I don't know if people can see my cursor, you probably can't. So basically that's a plan view of the river down there by Watcombe Fields, we've got the sewage works to the right, the river running down, sort of central really, the little wavy line. And then what we've got are 2 footpaths which people use at the moment. We've applied for a footpath diversion, which has been granted to us, so that the new footpath will run along from the bottom of the page all the way up to the top. It'll follow the river much more closely, and then it will deviate left as we look at it and rejoin the old path. The reasons we did that, because landowners wanted us to move the path. So without that, we wouldn't have been able to do this, but we think it will create a better path than we had before. Okay, Laura, if you can do the next slide. So what we're looking at there, the red line, is the line of the new path. So that's where you'll be able to go. So there's another path that comes in from the west there by Watcombe Farm. You'll still be able to walk down there, but you'll join at the river point. So I'm now going to show you a few pictures of what's been happening there recently. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is a plan, part of the plan where our first obstacle, as it were, moving away from the sewage works, where the path currently ends. We're going to run along the river, and the first obstacle is a ditch. So we needed to put something called a culvert in place, which the Environment Agency made us do lots of work for, and plans and various forms to fill in. So that will cover that ditch. We'll have a head wall, a retaining wall at one end, and another wall at the other end. There'll be a cattle grid, as you can see. To the left of the cattle grid, there'll be a bridle gate for pedestrians to access the route, and down to the bottom left there, you'll see a kissing gate where the path comes in from the left. If you could go to the next slide, I'll show you some pictures of all of that. Okay, first thing that volunteers did a couple of weeks ago when we were allowed to go back was to put a temporary gate in there. So we're now looking back towards Frome. The existing path finishes where the cows are, just around the corner there. The path will come along the river there to the left. It'll come to this gate, which won't be there permanently. This is just for access at the moment. Next slide. Thank you. This is the culvert, how it looked a few weeks ago. So that's that dirty great big pipe in there, which weighed a considerable, about a ton's worth of plastic pipe, 600 mil diameter. We had to carry that in with a tractor, lower it down. We put tons of pea gravel around it. We then put vegetative protective layers on it, and then we've covered it over with stones. Next slide. And we see at the end, we've created sandbags full of sand and cement, and a sort of dry stone wall. That's forming the head wall, and that's really solid. Next slide. That's what it looks like now after it's been filled in. So apart from the pea gravel, the covering that was underneath there, and the cement and the sand, I think we had to pay for. The sandbags were free. The hardcore that went under there was free. The topsoil was free. So we are working all the time on pro bono, volunteer donations, that kind of thing. But everything you see there was done by volunteers. So there were no, even the tractor was a donation for us. So next slide, please. So sorry, before I finish. So yeah, okay, another example of something we can get for free. There will be a cattle grid going in there at some point. We've got one which was donated by Orchard Lee. They cost about 500 quid, brand new. So we saved 500 quid there from Orchard Lee Estate, so thanks to them. Next slide. Okay, another thing that we're using is, because the existing path will no longer need a kissing gate, we've taken that away. And we're going to use that somewhere else on the route, which I'll show you in a moment. Next slide. This is about 18 months, 2 years ago. We had a bunch of Duke of Edinburgh volunteers. So this is where the path crosses the fields back towards Watcombe Farm and Selwood Lodge to go on towards Cooper Hall and the railway crossing, if you know that path. Duke of Edinburgh helped us to plant a hedge here along the right-hand side, and those 2 fences, the gap in the middle is the sort of 5 metre wide route for the path. So we'll have a 4.5 metre wide path when it's finished. Next slide. This is what it looks like now, or a few days ago before the rain. We've installed 2 gates so that stock can cross. At the moment, they're open all the time, but once the path is in operation, they'll be closed and the cattle will move in and out as and when the farmer wants to move them. All of the fencing that you can see on here has been done by Missing Link volunteers. You can see the hedge on the right has started to take off. And next slide, please. You'll see that we've also put down there some a willow screen. That was at the insistence of one of the landowners who wanted to shield people from his view when he was up in Selwood Lodge. So the best thing we could come up with was to plant a natural screen. And the idea is that that screen will be chopped down in about 5 years' time, because we planted about 450 little saplings in this area on the right there where the long grass is. Next slide. So that's a sort of 6-7 metre shelter belt, which in 4 or 5 years' time, hopefully those trees will grow high enough so that we don't need the willow screens and we can take those down. And we'll have a nice, lovely shelter belt which will link with the river. That'll be a great area for wildlife. Again, 400 plus trees, all the fencing done by volunteers. Next slide. That's where the kissing gate went to. So we're back on the riverside, back at the culvert. And the picture on the left shows you the kissing gate and just beyond where the cattle grid is at the moment. And then on the right, is a bit closer to the cattle grid. And you can see we put fencing all the way up the side of the river. We did that last weekend. We'll be finishing off that this weekend, Friday and maybe Saturday to do that. Next slide. This is looking in the other direction, so back to where the cars are there, that's where the cattle grid was, and beyond is sewage works. And we're looking back, and you see that the path will actually sweep to the left as you go, and the picture on the right shows that bend, and we've now connected the 2 bits so that we've now got a continuous space for the path to go through. Next slide. Okay, our biggest problem at the moment down there is vandalism. People cut fencing all the time to go fishing, to walk their dogs. It's quite hilarious, really, if it wasn't for the fact that we have to keep repairing things. So that is one of our biggest problems, is vandalism. And then I think that's either the last slide. If it is, I'll go to my, yeah, there's one more. Great. So in summary, we're looking at a total cost for that little bit all the way up towards Cooper Hall, where the railway crossing is, if you know that path, of about £86,000. We're calling that phase 3A. We've got about £30,000 of our own funds. We've got in-kind contributions of 11,000, gives us a shortfall of about 40,000. We've got 2 big bids in, one to Places to Ride for £80,000, and another one for the Lottery Community Fund of £12,500. We do also have a few promises from wealthy people who are going to put some money in there when we ask them. Our next steps, preparatory work for Cooper Hall to Jack's Lane. So we've got a surveyor. I was there yesterday afternoon with an engineer looking over things. We've got to make sure that wall at the canal where the old canal used to go is safe as well. So we're preparing also, for those of you who remember, we had planning permission a long time ago at the other end of the missing links for phase 2, which was along the railway. Sadly, a farmer will no longer sell us a strip of land that we need. So we've happily found an alternative route, which we've got Sustrans working on at the moment, and they're drawing plans up for us. So there's a lot going on. We've also made a lot of links with other organisations. So we've got Chapman Slade, Connect Chapman Slade. They are looking at connecting Chapman Slade with Westbury, with Frome and with Warminster, and they've actually got 2 or 3 really good routes that could be developed. We're also working with a group in Bruton who want to connect Bruton to Wincanton along the old railway line there. And suddenly everybody wants information and everybody wants cycle paths everywhere. So we are working with other people. Our biggest thing, really, the biggest thing that any councillors, that's councillors at Mendip District or county, or any town councils if they want, is to make it easier for people to get planning permission for these things. It is really time consuming and petty at times. We know that we're going to have a professional contractor on part of that route. We are having engineering drawings done now to do that. We know that there will be conditions put on us. We just need to know what they are. So we're 6 months in from the deadline that Mendip should have approved this planning permission. We need the green light, please, to do it. We're not asking for money. We don't need the money. We're going to try and source it ourselves. There are other areas, I think, where you get better cycling. So big message from me, Mendip District Council, get your act in gear. Give us a yes or a no. Either way, we need to know. All the information is on our website, fromesmissinglinks.org.uk. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Rich. So I must say there's some fantastic work going on by Missing Links. So, you know, it's really quite impressive stuff, but obviously a big message from Mendip there at the end, and that's the important thing. Agenda item 3 is to endorse the report and recommendations.
Anita, hang on, Rachel's got something. Is there any questions, Rachel?
Yes.
Sorry, Rach.
Hi, Anita. We've got a potential question from Helen Kay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes,
you can.
Kay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I had no idea that Mendip was holding you up, and so Rich, perhaps later we can talk about that. But I also wanted to know about the southern missing link. You mentioned that the farmer won't give you a strip of land, but there's another way around it. And I had a chat with Jane Llewellyn months ago now about section 106. And I was just wondering if you are intending to ask for funding, possibly through section 106 agreements with some of the FR3 fields, and the well, Sandy Lane is going back again. It might be too late on Sandy's Hill Lane, but with the FR3 fields in Keyford, whether we could ask for some money to fund the missing link on the southern bit in order to improve the, you know, the transport links around town for active travel. Is there an intention to do that? Jane might be able to answer. I don't know if you've got to that point.
Yeah, if I just we're very aware of what's going on to the south. So the change of route was actually out at Buckland Bridge and Elliott's Lane. So that's kind of northeast Frome, but we've sorted that now. But to the south, we've been waiting for Edmund Park to finish development, because they promised a cycle path through that estate, which looks like it's going to be built. And then there are loose plans to go further south to connect back up with Longleat for the national cycle network sort of route. So yeah, we'd love to work. It's a case of time, you know, energy, and making priorities. But yeah, absolutely.
So it could potentially link up with Feltham Lane, and there's is it CN24? And then people could go through the lanes in theory, depending on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Okay, agenda item 3 now, to endorse the report and recommendations on local government reorganisation. And Mel Usher's going to give us a brief presentation. Over to you, Mel.
Should I just introduce it, Mel, and then thanks, Anita. The really crucial thing about local government reorganisation and the study that Mel has done is that it doesn't come down on any one particular unitary proposal. It's completely neutral on that, but whatever proposal comes forward, it's about how the parish sector can integrate and work better with the unitary council. If we're successful in this project, I don't think it's overstating the fact, but it could have the most significant impact on our community than anything in the last 30 years from a council municipal point of view. So I think there are some really high stakes here, and I think it's really, really important that we sort of listen to what Mel's report says and decide how to move forward from that. So that was just a bit of an intro. Mel, over to you.
You need to unmute, Mel. You're on silent.
Got it?
Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I said, as usual, Paul's stolen most of my thunder. The report was initiated by the Town Council, but primarily commissioned by Somerset Association of Local Councils. And it's now gone to all 278 parish and town councils in Somerset for their views. And the results of that are being collected by the association as we speak. And why did they ask for that report to be commissioned with the help of Frome Town Council? Well, usually during the local government reorganisation process, the views of parishes and towns are completely and utterly ignored, and they don't play any part in the outcome. And I think a few of us believed that wasn't really a good way of handling this, and that parish and town councils have got a lot to offer. So, as I'll say later on, I think this is the first time that any group of parish and town councils have actually got in very early on the process and actually tried to change the way that it's going to operate. There's a lot of background material in this report that I put together, but it's really the 7 recommendations which I think are key. And for my one slide, could we put that slide up now, Laura? She's gone off to have her tea.
No, she's working on it.
Okay, while she's doing that, the 7 recommendations are fairly easy to, and most of you will have read the report anyway. The first one is that we have a Somerset Charter, which basically says these are the rights and responsibilities of those people who signed this charter. And I think that's to ensure that that what's being said during the process actually is carried out. The second recommendation is about service devolution. In some places, basically the unitaries said, right, this is it, this is what you're getting, take it or leave it, you're taking these services and we're closing them down. What is suggested in the report is that this should be done by request. So parish and town councils are very diverse bodies, and so it's up to them to go at the speed that they want and how much they want to get involved themselves. So that avoids the kind of one solution fits all approach. The third area, which is to foster local solutions that are sensitive and tailored to the needs of the area, so that we do get, an increase in diversity. What might be right for one town might not be right for the next, and so each group of parishes and towns needs to be able to decide themselves what kind of local solutions they're looking for. The fourth area, which I picked up on quite a few of the reorganisations that have taken place over the last few years, it's important to have something which I've called community networks, groups of parish and town councils, so that the unitary doesn't have to deal with 278 different organisations, so that you put together likely groups of parishes and towns that are able to operate together, and those community networks then provide a communications group and also where decisions can flow from. The fifth one is it's really important that unitaries actually have some local staff, and some staff of some presence as well, so that they act as communicators back into the unitary. They help innovation at a local level. They make sure that feedback is properly handled, and they unblock any delays in the way that Rich has just described in terms of the missing link. And so there needs to be one person of some standing, but also perhaps other staff also that are from the unitary. The sixth area is to establish a 5-year cultural change programme, because these are organisations that are coming from lots of different sources, whether it's parish and town councils, ex-district staff and ex-county staff. And so this is quite a big cultural change. And it's a massive shift. And so it's really important that people get to talk to one another and actually try and work out new solutions. And then the final one is that the parishes need to learn to work together, because they're usually very independent group organisations, and they need to better share good practice to make sure that other people know what it is that they're doing or what they'd like to do in the future. So they're the 7 recommendations. They're never going to set the world alight. There are probably other recommendations, but that's probably more than any other group of parish and town councils has asked for in the country over the last decade or so, when reorganisations have taken place. I just wanted to make 5 points. You can take the slides away now, Laura. This could all be a damp squib. Let's face it. The government might not approve any change in Somerset. They might just have too much on their agenda to even consider this. Or, as Paul said, it could turn out to be one of the most significant changes in local government in Somerset for at least a generation. It's important, therefore, that you, as one of the most articulate and competent town councils, keep your eye on the ball and continue to review the process. And remember that large bureaucracies traditionally don't give away power willingly or easily. So no matter what they say in this round of consultation, you're going to have to fight for it, and you're going to have to watch what they're up to. The second point is, as I've alluded to, I don't know where any other parish or town councils have actually set a group of demands before this is really kicked off. And so, by learning from others, I think the report is able to put together a strong case for more parish and town council involvement. And you'll note, where possible, I've actually said the parishes and towns should be involved right at the beginning, so in the planning stage, like in the charter, because there's also a tendency for large bureaucracies to complete work behind the scenes, behind closed doors, and to their own satisfaction, and then they're presented to others as a finished article. So, you need to be in there at the very beginning. Point 3 is, this is only the beginning. It needs frequent updates and shifts in responses as you see proposals from the players in the game. If a preferred option emerges, you need to have a fairly sophisticated monitoring system as a town council to ensure that the proposals that signed up to during the process of getting approval and in the heat of the debate are actually delivered. Remember also, on that point, that large bureaucracies quite often overcomplicate quite simple solutions. So you just have to make sure that they're understanding what your requirements are. Point 4, and there's only one left after this, the Somerset Association of Local Councils, SALC, needs to be a meatier body. It's currently run on a shoestring, and that's not a criticism of those involved, but it needs, at least for a temporary period, an injection of funds and resources to allow it to communicate with all of its 278 members, to be able to complete research, and to make rapid decisions when they need to. And oh yes, I forgot in this whole process that Taunton has no town council. And it's unthinkable that reorganisation can proceed without proposals to rectify that, because it would be a big hole in Somerset. And then the final point is, I would recommend the 7 proposals to you. They're not perfect, but they'll give you a basis for going forward, whatever solution emerges. Indeed, if you think about it, some should be capable of being implemented even if there's no local government reorganisation. If Mendip and the county really do, honestly and truly believe in them, and not Mendip but the districts in the county, then perhaps there's a point in actually trying to implement some of them. When the time is right, and this is a debate for another day, you as a town council need to interpret these proposals into what you want as a town council, whether it's inheriting land and buildings, running new, improved local services, or making crucial local decisions on things like planning. So that's it, really. That's the 7 recommendations. I think it's got us off to a good start. It's not a finished product, but I think it's something that we could is a good basis. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mel. It's really good to hear your thoughts, and thank you for that and for all the work you've done on this. So now we need, as councillors, to look to endorse this report. So could I have a...
Hang on.
Sorry, John.
Anita, there's John and then Maxine,
Okay.
and Rachel.
Okay, John, Maxine, Rachel, in that order.
Okay, so thanks, Mal. Great stuff. I understand that approach. Now, I think on your last couple of points, I'm just wondering, strategically, as Frome Town Council, it seems to me, given the potential for us to lose anything or just be sidestepped or kept out of the room, would it make sense for us to come up as Town Council with a public positioning, what we want, to be proactive, to decide what we want and try to make that happen, so that politically we have made a statement. This is what we think it should be. Either dragging services back or whatever, we can look at the detail. It seems to me that that's a logical sort of corollary of what you're saying. If we want to have some power, of course we need to monitor and follow the purpose. But if we were clear and strong, then we might draw a coalition of other parishes around us. I'm just wondering what you think, given your knowledge of those discussions. Thank you.
Okay. If you have the time and resources to be able to do it, then yes, but under the current circumstances, I think it would be quite difficult. And I guess you're saying, John, make a stand on whatever happens, whether it's 2 unitaries, 1 unitary, so that you don't need to make that decision at this stage because you haven't seen the cases. But you could say, this is what we as a town council would want to achieve under any of those circumstances. And yeah, that could be done. I mean, and that's, maybe would be 3 or 4 pages. And I think people in town would probably quite like to hear that, because you do pick up a lot of talk of, why can't we do things on our own? Why can't we take on more powers? It would be better if things were done locally anyway. And you've just got to look at the town centre at the moment. It's taken us 7 years to get to that point, and nobody's going to be happy at the end of it in terms of what we really wanted, which was a shared space scheme. So
positioning around. So positioning around the issues rather than whether it's Somerset or Mendip or we get rid of Mendip. Rather than that debate, it's the what we want out of it. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Thanks, John.
So there was Maxine, I think. Maxine and then Rachel.
Okay.
Thank you, Anita. Mel, thank you very much for this report and for all the work that you've been doing on this. I think, and I wonder if you'd agree with this, that what we really need to look at as well is what we want to take on and what the implications of that are, what it actually means, everything that it involves. Because there might be sort of, we'd love to be in charge of our planning, for example. But of course, there's an awful lot more to that than meets the eye initially. So I'm sort of wondering how we go about doing all the research to know exactly what that would look like. And my second point or question is, a lot of the problems that there are around is around social care and looking after the community. I'm just wondering whether you feel, in a way, having had this COVID crisis and all the networking that's been happening and all the positivity that has also been happening around people looking after each other, whether that's something that we ought to be really, really leaping on to, when we're looking forward to the things that we could do as a parish council or town council in a unitary authority. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. I think, thank you, Maxine. I think part of that is what John was asking. What is it you want as a town council? And I think that wouldn't be too difficult to do. The implications is a next stage, and you would need to do that before you really signed any documents to move services or buildings to yourselves. How much is it going to cost you? What does it mean in terms of council tax? And that's a political decision for you to make sometime in the future. And I think in the report I actually mentioned Chippenham, didn't I? Where they've finally, after 11 years, taken on all of the a lot of the services that were previously done by the All County Council, and that's pushed their precept up to 2.9 million. Surprisingly, though, the local population quite like the fact that a local council's doing that. And yeah, I think you will probably have learned a lot from COVID-19, the networking, and I just think we've got to accept that social services as we currently know it is not going to exist into the future. So we need to find new models that are based on a kind of more local analysis, a more local delivery, and a more use of local resources, whether that's through volunteers or through paid staff. And I can't see any other way forward than having to do it like that. And that does need a lot of thought in terms of what that means for both the town council and for the unitary. But I'm sure that there are better solutions around than the way we're doing things currently.
There's Rachel, Anita, and then if I may ask a question.
Anita, I've got 3 comments. Shane Collins, Adam Boyden and Lenka Grimes would like to comment.
Oh, I thought, is Shane going to go first?
Adam, you may as well go on.
Okay. Yeah, hi. I think it's worth noting that I know the Somerset County Council Cabinet is pursuing a papers and putting together a business case to the government. I think they're going to do that in July, as far as I know. They're pushing ahead, spending up to about £1 million with about 12 staff on communications on this. So it's quite a lot of effort during the pandemic. And the district councils have stopped. They were previously working with the county on different options on this, but when the pandemic the district councils, I don't think have done any work on their side of their preferred option. And I think that's all the 4 district councils, which is the collaboration option. And it's good to note, I like Mel's report in a lot of ways. There's a lot of good stuff in there. It does note, and the main report that covers it does note that that most of the recommendations could equally apply to the collaboration option, keeping the district and county councils structurally as the same, but increased collaboration across districts. The report doesn't go into that so much, but it should be noted that that's the case, because there's a lot of good stuff in there that could be happening now, without the expensive reorganisation. But also it's worth questioning whether this is the right time to really go into this now. Firstly, you've got the county pushing ahead, districts have stopped because of the pandemic, so it's a bit of an unequal fight. If you want to argue that the case, there are very good reasons why a unitary would be a good idea, but I don't think we're up. The districts certainly are not up for the argument at the moment, because there's just too much other work going on, and staff are still disrupted, and people are still supporting businesses and residents and all that. So I do find it quite. I would say unacceptable that the county are pursuing this now during the pandemic. And also, it's worth noting that there's probably a white paper due from government about devolution, and I think that's going to be in the autumn. So there might be lots more time to wait to see that first, before sort of engaging a lot on this. And I just thought, what do we think of that? What do we think of the timing of this being pursued by the county? Thanks.
Deb, are you going to go on that one, Fly?
I think it's outside of my remit, really. I disagree with Adam on one thing. The districts are actually doing some work, and I know that South Somerset have employed PA consultants to put a case together. So, but that's all I really want to say. It's the county council has decided to go down this route. It's not for me to comment on that.
Oh, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think, Adam, that we haven't approached the county to discuss this. It's the other way around. They heard we were interested and came to us and Salk and asked what we thought. If the town councillors tonight sort of agree to endorse the report, I would really hope that we could have some sort of discussions with the district in the same way, because actually the menu that Mel outlined in his 7 recommendations applies to whatever situation. It could be county, it could be groups of districts creating more than one unitary, or as you say, Adam, it could be deeper collaboration. I think certainly from my point of view anyway, it doesn't really matter what the arrangement is. It's how we see the future of the parish sector in playing a much bigger part in solving, particularly I think, the social problems that Maxine and Mel were just talking about in the future.
Thank you. Shane, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, please, thank you. Yeah, just to say, great paper, fascinating. And I absolutely support all the sort of issues you talked about for devolving down to Frome Town Council. You know, in particular street cleaning, it just amazes me that Frome has one street cleaner for the huge amounts of money we pay ID Verdi, or I can't remember which hedge fund owns the cleaning operation at the moment. But it seems crazy that those sort of things are not decentralized. So I guess my question really to Mel is how many of those, I don't know, I guess it's about 12 or 15 things you thought could be devolved, how many of them could be devolved under the Localism Act? And then just a slightly more general comment on this whole reorganization, which it seems to me the main driver for this is Somerset's debt, which by and large is caused by the increase in social care costs as people retire to Somerset and Isles County and then need social care a few years later. It strikes me that whoever is dealing with social care, whether it is a single county, a northwest or an east-west divide, whoever is dealing with social care is going to be in debt because the government has spent 10, 15 years avoiding a social care bill. So personally, I feel that social care should be sorted out before we go about a huge reorganisation of councils. We're obviously facing a recession. There's estimates of 6 million people unemployed in New Year when the furlough scheme of 9 million people stops. We're facing an economic collapse as well as the background of an environmental and ecological collapse. So I don't see, I'm not convinced of the need for change. And also I don't know if Mel or anybody else could answer this. I've yet to see an academic paper showing the savings made by unitaries in Wiltshire, Cornwall and Dorset. We've got these heroic figures of savings from Ignite in the Folgas report, which if you read deep down is simply based on what other counties have done. I can't see these savings actually being bought out. There seems to be no academic papers to suggest the savings have been made in other places. So personally, I'm completely unconvinced for the need for a huge reorganisation. But yeah, just to go back to the original question to Mel, really was what of these proposals of devolvement do you think could be done under the current Localism Act?
As far as I'm aware, all of them. And all of the examples that I gave in the paper, sometime since it was written, there are somewhere in the country, there are parish and town councils doing a version of that. So you could pick up any of those services in one form or another. They might not be completely what you want, but they would be substantially so. So that wouldn't be that difficult, to be honest. It's just a matter of the will, so that they could be devolved tomorrow if you could come to an agreement. Just a comment, I guess, on the savings. I too have not seen how those savings have actually panned out in practice over the years for where a unitary has emerged. And some of them have the feel of the red bus which went around the country with the £480 million that we were going to save to fund the NHS. It'll be interesting to see whether or not those kinds of savings will emerge in the proposals that are being made here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your question, Shane. Lenka, I think you had a question too.
It was just, I mean, following on from that, whether there's a plan to have any consultation with district councillors and county councillors, and are you still running your 3-tier council meetings that I understand you have? Because I think obviously that would be to the benefit, obviously, to consult with district and county councillors for the best for Frome.
Paul.
Yeah, and Lenka, absolutely. The 3-tier meetings are going on monthly, and we'd really like to see either the leader or the chief exec amend it to come and talk to that group, because I think it would be a really stimulating discussion. I think there's interesting. It's not up to us to consult on someone else's business plan. The county are doing a bit of that at the moment, and I would expect to see a business plan consultation coming out from one or more districts when and if they decide to put a business plan together.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Lenka. John, you had a question, and then Rachel.
No, I just have a quick comment. Of course, I fully endorse this report, and I think it's a great move forward. I just don't want us to get wrapped up that what we're talking about is dragging social care back here, or this or that. I mean, it could be any number of things. What we're essentially talking about here is dragging power back to us. So however that manifests this, I think I just want to make that point. So I don't want us to get dragged into the social care debates and what's going to happen. I think it's just about the power question.
Okay, thanks, John. Rachel?
We have 2 other comments, one from Max Wyde and one from John Clark.
Okay, Max?
Okay, I've just allowed Max to talk, and I've had to promote John to panelist because he's using an older version of Zoom.
Okay.
Can you hear me now, Anita?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Max.
I mean, I just wanted to make the point about John's comment about power and about devolution and things kind of coming down to you in this thing. I kind of think that, I do think when you're trying to set out a case where you kind of say, here are the things that we could do that we're not doing right now. The logic of devolution is they are deals. So it is a devolution deal that you would be after. And you have to kind of show by taking those powers, if you like, or taking that funding, how you can drive a better outcome. So it isn't simply about kind of saying, give us more power. You would need to kind of show that if you took responsibility for waste, all those sorts of things, that you could do a better job and that you could return, if you like, to the people who are devolving that to you, a lower cost service or a service with a better outcome, whichever it might be. So devolution is always about a deal. It's not simply about give us more. You need to show why that would advantage, if you like, county or the districts, because they're the people who currently hold those things. So I just sort of wanted to make that point, and so that you're clear about what you would achieve with those powers, why you could do that better than it is done currently, because that's a persuasive argument. And I kind of think, as well as demanding things, therefore, you need to be clear about what you would give back as a result.
That's great. Thank you very much, Matt. Good point. Thanks, Max. There was someone else with a question. Rachel?
It's John, and then I've got another comment from Martin Dimmery.
Okay.
John Clark.
John.
John, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I've just done that, I think. Thank you for uprating me. That's really good. I can see everyone else now, so that's great. Just a couple of points. I mean, I really like this paper, particularly the aspirations around localism, because I think any change that happens in terms of restructuring, and it will happen, whether it's now, whether it's following the devolution paper that comes forward in September, there will be a restructuring. So I really welcome the idea and the thoughts around localism and how that should be a core principle of any new arrangement. I wonder, though, Mel, how you will be able to bind any unitary authority to any decision making. So you talk about the community networks, but there's a real lack of detail that is in the One Somerset document, but there's a lack of real detail about what responsibilities they will have, how they will be made up, and most importantly, what their resources will be. And if you look at Wiltshire, where they have an equivalent known as area boards, they have, I understand, very little, if any, resources or any authority or any power. So that's what you need to think about, how that's going to happen. And I hear the points about deciding what Frome wants. And I understand what Paul was saying, that this document isn't about making a choice. But I think you cannot separate the two from what Frome wants, what perhaps the communities want as well, which is being left out of this discussion. And certainly the so-called consultation that the county is running is very flawed, if not dishonest, in that it only presents one option, and that's the One Somerset option. Where was I? So what Frome wants has to be, you can't disconnect that from what might be the best, most favourable option for any restructuring, or the restructuring which will take place. And if you're going for localism, which I support, and I suspect a lot of people will, and it will be best favoured in terms of community and empowering community, giving community voice, then you have to think about whether the East-West split, which is under discussion, I understand, it hasn't been particularly prevalent in the debates, and certainly Mendip has almost disregarded that publicly, but maybe their position will need to shift. So if you're looking at what Frome wants and what's most favoured in terms of localism and the principles around localism, I would suggest you can't disconnect that from the choice of split unitary, because a more localised unitary, i.e. the East, Yeovil, Glastonbury, Frome, will in itself mean a much more localised, centralised in terms of the district and the area and the constituents around that. That's the outcome of that. And finally, I think you have to include issues about social care budget. We know that there's been a massive 16 billion reduction in local authority spending, and we've seen really devastating cuts in social care by Somerset. And that's not going to change unless there's restructuring and unless there's financial benefits from that restructuring, and maybe devolution, the idea of devolution and combined authorities, i.e. the two unitaries and a combined authority, can get money down through that devolution agreement, will mean there will be funding around for that and investment. And also, let's not forget that there's a climate crisis coming, and we need the resources and the resilience as communities to manage that. And I pick up on Maxine's point that, you know, what we've learned so far, one of the things we've really learned is that communities can come together and can be more resilient. So we need to think about that in any solution that comes about, because we have to make Somerset zero carbon emissions, and we can only do that if there's investment and there's the financial support, and I would suggest there's a local empowerment to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I don't know if you'd like to come back on that, Mel or Paul.
I can say something. There's not much I disagree with in any of that. There's an issue here about timing, about fine balance of when do you start putting in more resources in terms of putting your own individual cases, Frome Town Council, together. Because if you go too soon and nothing happens, then it's been a waste during a period when things are fairly busy anyway. So that's the first point. The second, about binding any unitary to their promises. Well, as in my short introduction, I was obviously displaying red flashing lights in terms of large bureaucracies ignoring what they've said previously, and so keeping their feet to the fire is going to be really important. Perhaps the charter could be written in such a way that it did become binding on any unitary. So we will have to see what the outcome of that is. And the third is about the community networks proposal. And John's right, the area boards in Wiltshire, from the feedback that I've had, have not worked very well. And of course, one of the reasons behind that is that if it does come to a vote, only the members of the unitary authority were allowed to vote, rather than all of the other representatives who were there. So that's fairly selective. The best example of where community networks or the equivalent seem to work is in Cornwall, where there's a much kind of wider respect for those people who are involved and their engagement, and for them to be able to make proposals back to the unitary. So yeah, John's right. We need to, you need to kind of make sure that you keep your eye on this ball, because there's always the tendency just to backslide and to pick the easiest option in any of these kind of reorganisations.
Thank you very much, Mel. I think we've got one more question or comment from Martin Dimmery, and I think then we need to move on because we've got a big agenda tonight. So unless there are any others, is Martin there? Can you see Sarah if Martin's available?
Right, okay.
Ah.
Sorry, I couldn't find a mute button. Sorry. Some people think I should be muted more often. Mel, that's a really good report. Thank you very much. I'm talking quite regularly on this matter with David Fothergill, the leader of the Somerset County Council, who's pushing this forward. The one thing he said to me that rang alarm bells last week was that on the regional planning boards and the community network boards, which would comprise of unitary councillors and also parish and town councillors, he suggested that only the unitary councillors would actually get the right to vote. I think that would be a mistake. I think if you're having those sort of boards, everybody should get the opportunity for their voice to be heard. Of course, they get the right to recommend, but only the unitary councillors would be able to vote. And I wonder if it's worth including in your report that would be something which you would approve.
Yeah, I think I probably just answered that, Martin. I don't know whether you were able to hear. The community networks are dead ducks if they don't allow others to have an engagement and involvement. And if it's just the unitary councillors, they'll disappear fairly quickly. And that's how Cornwall started off. And it was a disaster. The chief executive lost his job, the leader of the council lost their job, and there were all sorts of ramifications because people realised this was a con. So it's very important that those community networks are set up correctly. And I think in the report, somewhere in the report, it says, that parish and town councils should be involved in their creation, both in terms of where the boundaries have been drawn, but also what their responsibilities are. So I think it's covered, but it's absolutely crucial. And if that is the case, and that is the proposal that's being put forward for just one unitary on a county boundary, then I think that would be enough, in my mind, to scupper it, actually.
Thank you, Mel. Well, that's obviously generated an awful lot of comment and questions. So good report. Thank you very much for everything. And thanks to everybody for all your questions. But I think now we need to look at the recommendation that's on the table, unless there's anything more pressing. So the recommendation is that we endorse the report of Appendix 1, and we delegate to the town clerk with the leader, deputy leader, and Councillor Ackroyd to take the next steps as described in that report. So could I have a proposer for that, please? John. And a seconder, Sheila. And all in favour? You got that, Paul?
Sorry, I was on mute then. Unanimous, Sheila, Anita.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, which is Frome Town Council Manager's End of Year Review. of the 2019-20 work programme. So who's actually presenting this evening?
Me, it seems it's my turn.
Oh, well done, Kate.
I'm going to give a real quick whistle-stop tour with the help of Laura, who's going to show some slides at the same time, if that's all right, Laura.
Give me 2 seconds, I'm going to try my best.
Slides are mostly there for photographs. There's a few words there, but I'll try not to be reading the slides as they are. So obviously this report was put together by all of the management team, and we're all here in the background. So if there's any questions at the end, you can ask various people various things.
Are you nearly there, Laura, do you think? Oh, yes, we are.
Okay, so obviously during this report is for the year 1920, so for ending in March 20. And during that year, we updated and improved our IT systems, which, as you can see, all the little glitches on tonight's meeting have gone really well and enabled the whole staff team to actually be able to work from home and for us to be able to deliver council meetings in this way. We've also supported staff development in many areas across that year. Next slide, Laura. A great deal of work took place in that period to ensure that the proposed Saxonvale development was comprehensive and included the sale of FTC land, the move from SS&L from Saxonvale via the town hall for a short period to the new home in Palmer Street, and initial work to explore the use of the Western Warehouse as a cultural destination. Phase 2 of the marketplace improvements, which have now started and are starting to take place, were planned and consented during that year. Next slide, Laura. The Planning Advisory Group reviewed 320 planning applications, including some major developments, and they're listed in this slide. And we started conversations with key stakeholders about vocational training. Next slide. The town hall is now a modern and accessible licensed wedding venue. And we continued to increase engagement and promote all of FTC's projects through a wide range of channels. We've worked with national projects, including Public Square, to develop the People's Budget, and shared our work on this and many other projects, whilst continuing to learn from other places at local, regional and national forums. Next slide. Over the period, we got to know more about the community development and how that works. We got a much better understanding of street level activity and the importance of it, and neighbourhood networks, which has stood us in good stead. We also recruited 2 new part-time projects officers into the role of children and young people's work and to deliver a full work programme. They started in the summer last year. And we continued to build on what we've done before to support community organisations across the town. Next slide. In terms of resilience, we delivered the School Active Travel Challenge, secured £75,000 of funding for a host of resilience projects that are listed here. 80 houses now have solar power and 8 schools signed up to the Energy Sparks project. The Climate Emergency Strategy and Action Plan were developed, and the Community Fridge won an international award in that period. Next slide. These photos really speak for themselves. The Rangers have done an incredible job in our parks and open spaces, and the Wild About Frome project led to the inception of the Wild About Tree project. Packsaddle play area finally came into our guardianship and now has new play equipment. And of course, the year ended with the start of a pandemic. And in the last few weeks of March, our entire staff team was redeployed to support a town-wide community effort to ensure nobody was left behind. We set up Uber Eats, Shop for Me, and Supportive Active and In Touch, Frome community drivers, Fair Frome, and other organisations to make sure that they were able to increase their capacity to support the most vulnerable members of our community. All of this was underpinned by the Check-in on Your Nearest 5 Neighbours campaign, which was brilliantly delivered by our communications team. That's it. Are there any questions? Laurie could probably end the slides.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Kate. Any questions from anyone? Richard?
It's more of a thank you, really, because I was leader last year through all of that. And I just have to say it's been a pleasure working with you guys. And it was, you know, mostly positive. I don't remember any heated arguments. You probably went away and muttered a few times under your breath, but I felt supported entirely through the process. And I think what we've done so far has been great. There's always more to do. We made a few mistakes, but, you know, frankly, I think the staff on this council have been wonderful. And you've all helped me to write this big summary of the year that I have to do for next month. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
I would certainly endorse that, Richard. Thanks. I think the staff do an amazing job, and that's a great amount of work that you've got through, and still, I know, ploughing on really hard. So well done, and thank you from all of us. So if there aren't any more questions, are there any more questions on that? Rachel?
Yes, I've got 2 questions, one from Andy Jones and one from Lenka.
Okay. Andy first.
Do that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Andy.
Thanks. That was a great report on what was achieved, a great sort of did well. What seems to be missing is what wasn't delivered that we'd hoped to deliver in the 1920 period. Are there any significant projects that had a shortfall?
Kate, shall I get that one? Or are you going to do it, Kate?
I can do that. So alongside this in the report, in the written report, is actually a chart that shows what we delivered, all the elements of the work programme, and that has got a traffic light system on the right hand side. So you can see the green ones were well underway and everything was delivered and on track. Where it is amber, for whatever reason, we were partway through delivering or hadn't quite completed, and the red ones were projects that weren't completed over that period.
Okay, thanks. I should clearly do my homework a bit more before I join the call.
Rachel had one, I think. Anita, did you, Rachel?
Yes, we had another question from Lenka.
Okay.
So I was just asking if you had any plans about reopening the town hall.
Shall I take that?
Please, Paul.
Yeah. We really want to open it as soon as possible, but I think at the moment the government guidelines aren't really allowing us to do that. But we have a moving back plan that Sarah and Rachel are leading on, that will kick in as soon as we can find a way to do it safely for both for the public coming into the building, but also the tenants and the staff. So we want to do it as soon as we can, but we have to do it safely.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Can I just add that thank you, a big thank you. I'm really enjoying going outside and like Rodham Meadow and stuff, and finding all these different places. I just love the way it's been maintained in the park, and everything's really, really nice. Thank you.
Hats off to you, Chris, and the team. Well done. Okay, thank you. If there aren't any more questions then for the moment, I think we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the proposal to develop phase 3 of the marketplace project. I think we're over to you now, Nick. Is Nick with us?
Can he, Nick, are you able? Yeah.
I am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. I'll be brief with this. I'm the kind of warm-up act for Jane Llewellyn, who will provide all the kind of intelligent and informed stuff on this proposal. I just wanted to talk briefly about two areas. One is from a visitor's perspective coming to Frome, and the other from people living and working in Frome. And this is about the Boyle Cross area. If you were visiting Frome for the first time and driving through it from either Bath or Shepton Mallet, you'd either come down North Parade or Bath Street and you'd come into the centre of town, and you could quite quickly and quite easily miss what's happening and what we have in our beautiful historic streets around the town. And that's really because there's not what I would say is a hook to people to make them stop and think, oh, that looks nice. This looks like a nice place. I think I'll go and stop and have a look around. And then the people who live and work here, who I would say that the Boyle Cross area, that space in the middle of town, is the centre of our town. It's the place that people gravitate to for things like Christmas. It's where the independent market has its main focus. It's the centre of our town. And yet, since it was a car park when I first came to Frome, and it's now over the last 5 years, I think, in total, from the sort of developments and changes, become a very sterile, if I can use that word, area that's underused by traders and is not, frankly, very visitor or resident friendly to occupy. I think it could be so much nicer. I think it should be so much nicer. And I'd like it to become a place that people would drive through and think, wow, that looks great. I want to stop and stay and have a look around here, and then, you know, put money into our economy, spend time here. And equally, the people who live and work in the town and the people who come into the town to visit at weekends or evenings or daytimes will think, oh, it's a lovely place to stop, meet friends and visit. About 3 weeks ago, we had an artist impression created by a local artist of what that space could look like. And it was deliberately a kind of naive painting. So it was something I and any of us could take around and show to people, say, this is an artist's impression of what that space could like. What are your thoughts? What are your comments? What are your ideas? And in my brief time as a town councillor for Market Ward, so just over a year, I was really overwhelmed by the positive responses from the people I spoke to. I had 100% positive reactions from people I spoke to, and I spoke to over 100 people. Those are residents, people who live in the area, people who visited, local businesses. And I would really like us, as we have this opportunity of coming hopefully to a time when COVID is starting to be more manageable, to have a position where the town can almost wake up from this slumber and see phase 2 delivering a town that people can drive through slowly and not have to queue behind buses blocking the street, but can come in and sit and find a place to sit and talk and meet friends and be surrounded by greenery, listen to the fountain playing, listen to the fountain water sort of trickling, and also sit under some shade and just make that a real town centre. So I'll now hand over to Jane. That's my kind of vision idea for it. Hand over to Jane to talk about what the options would be if you were to support this idea. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Nick. As you'll see from the paper, if you agree to approve the principle of further landscape improvements to the Boyle Cross area, there are two options. The first option is that we re-engage Nicholas Pearson, who previously did some landscaping work for us in the marketplace. And we would ask them to update the existing proposals that they have done for us. Those proposals were done in October 2018, and we would only concentrate on the ones that looked at enhancing the Boyle Cross area, and that would be with some additional seating, possibly some more planters along the pavement outside of ITEC and the TSB. Given that the majority of the surveying, the drawings and investigations have already been done by Nicholas Pearson, it's expected that their costs would be much less than employing a landscape architect from scratch, which is option 2. As far as we can tell, the current designs are acceptable to highways and Mendip. Although we don't know the exact costings of this additional work, it's hoped that some of the contingency from phase 2 could be used for this purpose. We would still carry out some engagement to check that the designs are still popular with the local community and seek confirmation that they would be acceptable to Mendip District Council and Somerset County Council highways. I have spoken to Nicholas Pearson and they are willing to pick up the work again if we agree to go with option 1. So there wouldn't be a need for a new contract and we wouldn't need to go out to get 3 quotes. And also hopefully it would mean that the timescales would be that we could get this work done or underway with the end of the phase 2 works that are currently going on, which I think takes us to about the end of August. Option 2, to engage a landscape architect or other suitably qualified person to design a new scheme. For this, we'd need to issue a brief setting out our vision and requirements together with the process that we would need to follow. I won't go into too much detail on this because that's all set out in the report and the appended brief. The key elements that are needed will be technical drawings so that we can gain the necessary consents and to design any bespoke seating and planting if that's required, and all the images that we would need to be used for further engagement purposes. Because we would be proposing a new contract in line with the council's financial regulations, we would need to get a minimum of 3 quotes from suppliers. Based on previous contracts, we've estimated that that could be somewhere between £7,000 to £10,000, but that is an estimate. We would need to present any new designs to Mendip as the current landowners and to get written confirmation that planning permission is not required. Whilst I don't think it is, we would need to go through the process to get that confirmed, just because that's what we should do. And once all of that's in place, at that point we would carry out some further public engagement. I've set out the dates in the estimated timeline in the report, and you'll see that that would take us to, sorry, for option 2, that would take us to mid-October and beyond. But if councillors do agree to go with option 2, brief has been prepared and can be sent out this week to hopefully speed that process up. The estimated cost, again, I stress this is estimated for option 2, including all fees, would be around £25,000. There's no allocated budget for this project, and so either the general reserve or the Saxon Vale legacy earmark reserves are possible options. And that takes us to the recommendations. I don't know if Laura can put those on the screen for me, please.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jane. So the recommendations are to endorse. That's not the right one. I think it's.
Anita, Rachel's got a question, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got 4 people who'd like to comment.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I meant to ask if there are any questions after I've gone through the recommendations.
So Anita, maybe if we start with Rob and then go to the questions from the participants.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, thank you for that report, Jane and Nick. But what I'm having read it, I have read it twice now, I'm still not really clear. I don't know how to put this exactly. Why we wouldn't go with phase 1, just sort of adding in, sorry, the first one, without just adding in the extra bits and pieces that Nick's been advocating. I mean, can you enlighten me as to quite why the 2 are so different, other than the obvious factor that one costs a huge amount more and takes a lot more time and all of that?
Jane, should I take that?
Yeah, please do.
Because Jane and myself and Nick didn't think of option 1 until the last minute, Rob, to be perfectly honest. It dawned on us that we remembered that Nicholas Pearson had done so much work on this, and I kind of woke up in the morning thinking, why are we thinking about employing a new landscape architect?
We've already done it.
So we thought actually to give you the 2 options, because we'd spoken to quite a lot of councillors about employing a new landscape architect, and Jane had put the work in to produce the brief. So we thought it would just be more transparent if we put the 2 options in for you.
So would they actually materially look any different? Will we get something really different through the two, or can we actually still ask, sorry, I've forgotten their names, the current architects to just incorporate all the extra bits that we seem to want to have now, and they can do that, and there we are.
I would hope so. Yes, they would take the as Nick said, the picture, and we would have conversations with them of describing what we would like, and then they would come up with some designs that would work on site. So I hope that would be the more appropriate route to go down.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. I think we're going to hear from Adam Boyden.
All right. Yes. So thank you. It's probably not entirely relevant to this, but you mentioned getting permission from Mendip District Council as current owners. I had a chat with the leader of Mendip District Council just before this meeting, and she said that I could say, if no one else has, that there is a plan for Mendip District Council to transfer the Boyle Cross and Marketplace to the Town Council. So at some point, you won't have to ask for permission because it'll be your land, the Town Council's land, and that proposal should be coming forward in the Cabinet meeting on the 6th of July, in just over a week's time. So that's good news.
Thank you, Adam.
If you didn't know it already, which maybe some of you did. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I just what we don't know, Adam, is what the proposed deal is. Max Wide talked about what's the deal, and I think we would want to see what is being proposed by Mendip before councillors think about accepting the ownership of it.
Okay.
Okay. Keeping it close to your chest. Thanks. Okay.
No, just have nothing on my chest.
Okay. Lizzie, you have a question?
Yeah, just wanted to clarify on the numbers a little bit, because you said that for option 2, landscape architecture is about 7,000 to 10,000. We're assuming that for option 1, it's less than that. But then the overall budget is 25. So that extra 15 to 18 is presumably for the plants and
so that would be
seats and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And are there any options, and what options could we look at about how we might fund that, not from the Town Council, but through sponsorship and partnerships with local community, local businesses and so on and so forth? Because it's quite a big chunk of money which will be recurring for doing something very important. I don't think there's any disagreement about the overall principle of it, but just about the financial mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly something that we could look into. I think, given that the timescales that we're hoping to work to, I think we'd want to know that we would be able to pay for everything to be put in place, and then maybe, if we aren't able to sort sponsorship out during that period of time, we could look to going to the businesses and seeing if they wanted to sponsor something once it's in place. But I think that's more just so that we can be assured that we can keep to a time scale. But yes, certainly that's something that we could look at.
Anita, Paul Horton's got a question, I think.
Paul?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of, firstly, I'm not one of the people that think this is a kind of sterile space. I think actually it's quite successful in many ways. Is certainly underutilized. There's no doubt about that. It'd be nice to have more events there, but maybe that will happen if we get the transfer from Mendip. But I do have, and at the same time, if it's possible to enhance it and kind of will lead to a more vibrant town centre, then I'm completely behind that as well. But we have some concerns about the kind of process that we're going through. We've had a few discussions amongst councillors, and as I believe probably the only design professional on the council, my concern is that we've kind of rushing to a solution without really thinking through the options and really thinking through the implications of them. So I am heartened to know that we are going to have a landscape architect on board one way or another. So I'm hoping, what I want to say really is that I hope we go through a very careful process of thinking about what our different options are and what the implications of the different options are, rather than just rush straight into a kind of the solution that's already been presented, which may have some holes in it. I think that's probably all I need to say.
Thank you, Paul. Sheila, you had a point to make?
It's just on that line, really. The recommendation says that things will return to council for further approvals if necessary. I wondered what would return? Is it just financial, or would it be a design thing like Paul's suggesting, or under what circumstances would you return to council in order to get approval?
Paul.
I think Paul's right, and the question you answer is really valid, Sheila. I think what we would probably want to do is to come back to a council meeting. This is the preferred option. What do you think? So there's a kind of an approval around the design, but the other question undoubtedly is, if we have a contingency within phase 2 of the marketplace remodeling, and we can do it within that contingency to do the landscaping, then we wouldn't really need to come back to council to approve that expenditure, I suggest. But I think listening to the discussion, I think it would be right to come back to get council approval over a design.
So we're approving now, because I think the recommendation is simply asking us to approve option 1, and that you would return should finances be much more than we might expect, and possibly return for a design approval. Or
I mean, I think that's up to you as councillors. It seems quite a strong argument from my point of view. So if you as a group felt that was appropriate, then that's what we shall do. Anita, Nick's got his hand up there.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. I mean, listen, Paul and Sheila, I mean, everyone else. I mean, it's a very subjective process, this, and there's a whole range of factors around it. I mean, just the planting element around, you need to have something that's sort of structurally presents a sort of border feel that's vandal proof to a point, that's sufficiently hardy and so on. So, I mean, there's no question in my mind that I would ever be trying to sort of say this is what's happening. It would be coming back with a plan with suggestions of various things that would be offered up and presented by, or the report would be written by professionals in this field, because I'm certainly not that. So it's about getting the right people to do the work. And it would seem, when Paul suggested it last week, a bit of a no-brainer to use an organisation that's already familiar with the space. And if we can bring it in within the phase 2 contingency fund, then brilliant.
Okay, Jane.
I just wanted to assure Paul about process, really. I think if you read the original report, or the section that was my original report, not including option 1 at this point, it was quite process heavy. So, I am aware of the processes that need to take place, because obviously want to ensure that what we do is well thought through and planned, and that we don't miss anything, but at the same time, where possible, trying to keep within timescale, so that there is a process that will be followed.
Thanks, Jane. Are there any more questions on that before we take it to the vote?
Mark Dorrington, and I think Rachel had from participants as well. Okay. No, just Mark and Anita.
Talking about further scrutiny, will any of these plans, whichever are adopted, have to come before planning board, or our planning committee rather? I don't know at what extent we have to put it, because it's going to be work in a conservation area, and even if we do own it, we'll still have to ask Mendit for permission to do what we want to do there. Jane, perhaps you'll know the answer to that.
Yeah, so we have had some preliminary advice from the conservation officer suggesting that we wouldn't need conservation area or listed building consent. So that's encouraging. There is permitted development that will allow structures of a certain size within the planning regulations, and I think they come within those regulations, but part of the process that I've set out is that we would need to check that with the district council. However, that wouldn't necessarily be through the form of a planning application, the type that we see at the planning meetings. If we need to do that, it would be a certificate of lawfulness, which actually isn't necessarily there for comment and consultation. It's a legal determination by the district council as to whether it is or isn't needed. So we probably won't see it at planning, but there is a process that we can follow just to make sure that we know that we're doing things properly in planning terms.
Thanks, Jane. Any more questions? Rachel, did you have a questioner? No? Okay. So can we take this now to the recommendation then, if we can? So the recommendation is that we approve the principle of further landscape improvements to the Boyle Cross area as described in this report, that we take option 1 and delegate to the Planning and Development Manager in consultation with Councillor Dove to progress the scheme as far as possible within the constraints of the existing project budget for phase 2 of the marketplace, and then return to council for further approvals if necessary. So as a starting point, then could I have someone to propose that, please? Lizzie. And Rob to second, thank you. And all in favour?
That's unanimous, I think. Can't see anyone's hand not up.
Thank you. Okay. So agenda item 6 then is an environmental resilience, transport and energy proposal. So over to you, Anna.
Thanks. I'll just try and share my screen. Hopefully you can see that. Great. Okay. You can see that okay?
Yeah, we're fine.
Great. Okay, sorry, it's the second cheesy photo of me cycling, but I just have to declare at the beginning of this presentation, I do have a vested interest because I am an avid cyclist and I would love to see some safer cycling and walking routes around Frome. So I'm just going to go through a little bit around the transport ideas, some feedback from our recent survey, and then talk a little bit about energy at the end. So first, it is the What Next for Frome survey that Rachel and the comms team put together recently. And what we found was actually walking and cycling and active travel was really, really high on people's agendas. So the first question, where would you like Frome Town Council to concentrate our efforts to revitalise Frome? Supporting walking, cycling and public transport is second after helping local businesses to rebound. And in terms of what people would like to see happening around Frome, roads, parking and transport was actually the top issue. And when we break that down into more detail, actually cycling was one of the top issues. So that's great to hear. And obviously it's high on the agenda nationally as well. And there's been government announcements of different sort of funding packages for pop-up cycle lanes and for widening pavements and road closures, for example. And obviously we've been keeping a close eye on those and seeing how we can link in with that. But as is often the way, you know, when something's announced nationally, when it gets down to sort of local level, it often ends up as not being huge amounts. And the way that funding was actually divvied up is based on how many people are using public transport regularly. So obviously in Somerset, we don't have amazing public transport already. And as a result, we've also got less of the funding. So the initial tranche was 120,000 and that's already been allocated to help some towns to do some of these active travel programs and some cycle lanes. And that does include support in Frome of the temporary road closure at the town centre. So that is a positive step, but that has been allocated. The Mendip District Council had 102,000, which is supporting Mendip towns and others to reopen their high streets. And there may be some funding potentially through them for some signage and for boosting business activities. But again, it's not a massive pot that we can suddenly implement a new cycle route with. Somerset County Council are also due to get another almost £500,000 later in the summer. And the idea is that we need to develop sort of costed feasible plans that can be quite quickly implemented. But the thing that a lot of us felt, or lots of people locally have been talking about it, is that, now is the time, really. Now is the time that people have been walking and enjoying streets with less traffic and cleaner air. Now is the time because it's better weather, and that's the key time that people are walking and cycling. And there's just an increased awareness of the benefits of walking and cycling and the need for wider pavements and safer roads for people to cycle on. So we really felt that although there are, and there probably will be more further funding coming forward in future, but we really felt that actually if we could do something, over the next few weeks and really sort of show our commitments to enabling particularly safer cycling in Frome, that would be brilliant. And as far as I'm aware, that I don't think there are any on-road segregated cycle lanes in Frome, which is pretty amazing for a kind of clean, sustainable town. One thing that we did find out today, actually, was the last bit, is that Somerset County Council earlier this year announced £1 million funding for towns and parishes to apply for. Obviously, that got waylaid by the coronavirus crisis, but that is opening for bids in August. But I was doing some calculations earlier, and if there are 279 towns and parishes in Somerset, then that's probably about £3,000 worth of funding each. So what we've done initially is look at, what ideas people have about this. And so we launched, based on some work that others have been doing around the country, we launched an interactive map, which I'm sure you've heard about, in partnership with Commonplace. We've had over 1,000 comments on this map. If you haven't looked at it, please, there's a link there. Please don't, it's not too late. Do go on there and comment. And the good thing about the map is that you can go on and not only comment, but you can also see other people's comments and agree and disagree and things like that. And the idea is that we will then sort of collate all of these comments, look at all these different issues, and really have a proper evidence base for action in the future, and to develop a really comprehensive, safe walking and cycling plan for the town. So the first idea is, we need some action and some paint on roads. So we were looking at the comments on the map and talking to lots of people, and Paul Horton and other sort of Keen and Rich Ackroyd and others who have lots of experience cycling around the town. And we felt that actually if we could focus on an initial project and get that hopefully implemented over the summer, that could be a really good start. So this is the area that we're looking at. The reason that we chose this area is that people had commented it on the map, and also because basically it would link Welsh Mill Road, as you can see. It would go up Spring Road, and it would actually link many different places. Sorry, I don't know if you can, my picture's in the way. Let me move it. But it basically connects, potentially you can cycle along from the centre of town, along the river, along the cycle path. You can then go up Welsh Mill and Spring Road. You can then safely get to the hospital, the medical practice. If we get this new cycle lane introduced, you can then also safely cycle to Frome College, Frome Leisure Centre, and then also link up to the Stonebridge estate where lots of people live. And also there are cut-throughs from there up to Commerce Park. And we know from the 6 years I've worked here, I've had so many comments about how the difficulty of getting to Commerce Park without a car. So we felt like it was a sort of win-win place to start. And as part of this, we have been working with a transport consultant who's based locally and is sort of volunteering his time initially to develop a comprehensive feasibility analysis for this. And as I've outlined in the paper, the initial cost, the cost of implementing this would be around £20,000. We've linked up with Somerset, who have said that, they said to me, we've changed our ways. We want to say a big yes now. We're going to go ahead and do things quickly and proactively. We want to show that we are committed to this. So I've submitted an outline proposal just for their active travel cell to have a look at. And the idea is that potentially Somerset would take this on as a project, so they would manage it and they would yeah, sort of take control. It would be their liability, for example. I know some people are worried about that, but because it's their roads and everything, if anyone had an accident, it would be their liability. And they would cover insurance and things like that. But Frome Town Council would potentially cover the construction costs, so sort of line painting and the anti-slip surfaces and things like that. Because this feels like the only way that we can actually get in there and actually get some action happening on the ground. And there is a reasonably high chance that in the meantime, we might be able to work with Mendit, for example, and get some funding to do some cycle lanes with them. There may well be other pots that come up, but we just felt if we get ready and sort of get ready to implement this and can commit some resources to it, then that would really mean that we can actually, make a difference in these crucial next few weeks. Then I thought I'd just mention a couple of other things we are doing around active travel and sort of encouraging it. So one of these is linking with Frome Tech Shed, who are developing a network of clean air monitors around the town. So we've already installed, I think, the first 3. We've got another 3 to come online soon, and there will soon be a new website called cleanairfrome.org, I think .org. Yeah, .org. I can send a link when it's launched. And the idea is that people can see live data on air quality and air pollution, and hopefully through that they can see, the impact, for example, outside schools in particular, for example, of driving outside the school and dropping your kids off rather than walking, and just to enable people to have a better understanding of air quality impacts around the town, and also be incentivized to take action. Other things that we're doing, so as I sort of talked about earlier, what we really need is a sort of comprehensive network of proper cycle routes around town, and the government has recommended this structure, which is basically called a local walking and cycling infrastructure plan. And I was hoping I'd saved some budget from last year's resilience budget. I was hoping to carry that forwards. It's not sure at the moment with all the budget issues around coronavirus whether that's going to be possible, but we're looking at opportunities to secure some funding so that we can develop this comprehensive study for the town. And it is really, really important because, for example, Taunton and Bridgewater in particular, for example, they have got these, they call them LC whips. They've got these plans in place already, and it's because they have these plans ready to go that they've been able to secure funding for new measures like new cycle lanes. We still have our e-bikes for hire, and I would love to expand that over the next few months if that's possible. We're planning doctor bike sessions, hopefully at Balls Cross, starting in the next couple of weeks. We're also going to be looking at doing cycle training classes, because as I say, it just feels like a real opportunity. There's never been I've never seen so many people cycling around Frome, which is brilliant. I normally know half the people, but now there's like strangers cycling through. Well, I don't know, it's brilliant. And then we're also working with a medical practice to link so that people get signposted from medical practice to join these sessions. We're also supporting the cycle courier scheme from A to B, and we've done a 5-minute map for schools because obviously not everybody is able to. We want to encourage people to walk and cycle and scoot and do as much as we possibly can around that. But I do know as a parent myself, sometimes you need to drop the kids and go off to another meeting, or it's not always possible. So we've also got these sort of park and stride maps. So the idea is that, if you really do need to drive, then could you park 5 minutes away? And we've got locations identified for each schools as sort of part of the legacy of the active travel plan that we've been doing. And we will also be linking them with the clean air monitors so that we can sort of combine those two things, and people can really see the impact of traveling actively or parking further away. And then recently, or just this week, we've linked up with, I think it's a global company called Komoot, but one of the project managers lives in Frome, and we're working with her to develop a sort of whole package of walking and cycling routes on that, and that will hopefully be on our website quite soon. But I really recommend having a look at Komoot, and there's just thousands and thousands of lovely walking and cycling maps that you can access for free. The next thing in the paper that I mentioned is that Bruton Town Council and other sort of cycling groups in the area have put together a list of requests to Somerset County Council to really sort of help us get a network of safer cycling and walking routes in our different towns. And they've asked whether Frome Town Council would be happy to sign it. So just move this out of the way. But yeah, so one of the things that they've highlighted is that, for example, at the moment, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is pretty typical, I think, sort of nationally everywhere, you know, most of the budget, most of the transport budget is spent on currently on roads. So in 2018-19, Somerset spent £47 million on roads and 116,000 on cycling infrastructure, i.e. 2% of the budget. But if you look at the cost benefit analysis of investing in cycle lanes, you know, and the savings on the NHS and clean air and everything else, you know, the benefits are absolutely massive. So is there something we can do to work with Somerset to redress that balance? I'm not going to list all of them. I think they're in the paper, or they're available as an appendix. But the idea is that really that we can all work together to link up, to get safe cycle routes between all the different settlements, that we can access, have safe cycle routes along the former railway lines, like the brilliant Missing Link project, and that we can prohibit pavement parking across the county and also reduce the speeds, particularly on rural roads and in residential areas. So that's it, I think, on the transport. And then while I'm here, I wanted to also talk about energy, because one of the things we've been looking at over the past sort of 5 or 6 years really is how can Frome become a zero carbon town? And in 2016, we commissioned a report from Climate Works in Bristol, and they looked at basically, well, first of all, they looked at why we should become a zero carbon town and all the benefits, economic and health and everything else. And then they looked at how we could do it. And what they found was that actually, I mean, we need to do a whole range of different things. Obviously, we need to insulate and save people lots of money and things like that. But actually, if we're going to meet cut our carbon by 2030, one of the ways we can do it is through wind turbines. So we only need about 8 to 10 wind turbines to meet Frome's current electricity demands. And so yes, in 2016, we committed to becoming a zero carbon town. And then, as I'm sure you're aware, in end of 2018, we brought the target date forward to 2030. So we've only got 10 years left to meet that, to meet these targets. And if we don't have some action, you know, we really need significant action each year to minimise the risks around climate change. So the letter that we have drafted is basically to support Frome Renewable Energy Co-op. We're not suggesting that Frome Town Council is suddenly going to start developing its own wind turbine projects, but it's just a letter of support that we can send to local landowners that says, look, these are the benefits. You know, if you've got a small area of land, half an acre of land, Frome Renewable Energy Co-op can offer £10,000 to £20,000 worth of rent for just a smaller area of land. As it would be 100% community owned, the community benefit would be around £200,000 to £300,000, because all of the profit goes into a community fund to support activities around fuel poverty, for example, and we would work with the local residents to get their input into that. There'd also be lots of opportunities for cheaper electricity for local residents. There are lots of examples now where you do lots of, they call them sleeved power purchase agreements, but it basically means that residents can buy the electricity directly from the wind turbine, and that means that it's quite a lot cheaper than fossil fuel energy. So there are loads of benefits to doing this. At the moment, we're just asking whether Frome Town Council could sign the letter, and then we can send it out. Just to say, right, we'd like to explore it, you know, not to say that we're definitely going to do it, but let's have a look. And as part of this, in the longer term, we would love to also look at doing a landscape sensitivity analysis. So looking at the whole of Frome and the surrounding areas and looking at which areas are suitable, which landscapes are suitable for wind, but also not just wind, also solar panels and trees, for example. So that will be coming up in the next few weeks, hopefully. I think that's it. Just the recommendations are, yes, to approve fund. Sorry, hi Rachel.
Hi, we have a question from John Clark.
Okay.
Rachel. John.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, just one thing is I just would like to strongly endorse this whole proposal around promoting cycling and walking around Frome and the cycle routes. That is excellent. It totally links with the missing links, etc. And I think it's just one thing to alert the. I was just reading the recommendation, which is the last sentence of the recommendation in the executive summary. Council signed a letter of support for active travel and community energy and supports a landscape sensitivity analysis, which I think is fundamental and actually within the environmental resilience framework, which we've been talking about, which we approved formally in, I think it was our last live council meeting. Part of that proposal is to do this full accounting of all these different impacts, both on the energy side, but also on climate mitigation, conservation, but also including biodiversity into that assessment. So I think that's important. And so I see how this could fit with that, the study, whatever this thing, land sensitivity analysis is. I have no idea what that is. I'm familiar with landscape management, landscape assessment, but landscape sensitivity. But I think, so I think that I just wanted to alert you that these discussions, and of course, Anne, you're not fully aware of our discussions internally, but we want to bring that to you. And so then the signing the letter of support, one of the issues I was quite confused by was the whole report was fantastic, and I'm totally supportive, except the last bit on wind. We haven't really been consulted on this, and I think we need to discuss this. And it seems to be like an add-on to the end of this report. I'm not sure if it's, maybe we could just remove that bit. I'm not sure why we need to sign a letter of support to FRECO, which is an independent entity of the council, who can go and explore all they want. That's fine, there's no problem. But as far as town council signing a letter of support for that, I think we need to talk about that. And one of my concerns is that, this is all linked with what we aim as a council to do to, promote and, protect Frome's natural environment. And the thing about, if we're going to talk about windmills, well, let's talk about the commissioning costs, the decommissioning costs, the impacts on wildlife and amenity as well. And I think one of the great things about the period of lockdown, we all had lots of chance to walk across the landscape. And, to my dismay, I've come across, solar farms blighting landscape. And then we also have windmills. Now, windmills are another case altogether. I think we need to look at that separately. So my recommendation is, I'd like to fully endorse this, fully. But I think if we could leave that last point out, the fifth recommendation from the report, which is to sign the letter of support, pending further discussion, but also, pending how we can integrate this whole analysis of what we want to do in terms of promoting these different types of energy forms, which can be controversial, how we want to do that within a sort of coherent framework. So that's my comment, is to completely approve everything in this report, except we just eliminate that last bit around with the wind, so we can actually have a proper and informed discussion. And there's nothing to stop FRECO from going off and doing that. And if they need a sort of letter of support of introduction, I think we could do that. But I think it's the fact that we, as my personal view, I don't think our council should be endorsing wind power development in our local area without doing some consultation properly. Thank you very much.
Anita, so what John is doing there, he's proposing an amendment to the regulations. Which I think, John, was to remove the last bullet point from them. So what someone else would need to do would be to second that, and then you would vote on that removal from the recommendations.
Okay, I can't see the screen at all, so I can't see who's. Rachel,
shall I stop sharing? I'll stop sharing.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Great, Rachel, is it something to do with John's recommendation?
It's not to do with John's recommendation, but it's just to say that John Clark wanted to comment on the presentation. So I'm not sure where that fits best.
Well, I think John's made a proposal that someone might want to second, and then you could vote on it. Sheila's got something.
Sheila, you're looking.
I'd sort of like to just point out that I think, John, you were asking. You said at the end there that you were happy for us to sort of support FRECO to go and find out the sort of possibility of setting up a wind farm. Is that what you said?
No. It's signing the letter of support to link FRECO with local landowners to explore opportunities for wind. That's the fifth recommendation. I think we can eliminate that.
But you said just now, when you were sort of going through it and saying that you didn't agree with that last recommendation, you did say, I thought I heard you saying that it was okay for the council to,
it was okay for FRECO. If FRECO want to go out and do that, that's fine.
But you also said that you were happy for the council to support that. But did you not mean that?
No, I did not say that.
Said it, but I don't think you meant it.
Okay, well, I didn't mean what I actually said is I'm fully willing that I would be happy if we could need a letter of introduction or something, but I'm not willing for the council to take a position that we are trying to promote wind power in our local beautiful landscape.
So that's fine. So I'm just wondering whether that last thing is basically a letter of introduction. Is that what it is, Anna? Yeah. So it is just a letter of introduction. It's not saying Frome Town Council agrees with wind power, and as far as
it says letter of support.
Well,
and I can accept that.
Okay.
Okay. Anita, there's lots of hands up here.
I can see Maxine, Rachel.
And I just wonder whether anyone is wanting to second John's proposal to remove the fifth recommendation.
Now, Paul, you're shaking your head. You don't want to recommend it?
I didn't want to recommend it. I was just going to ask if we could have response from either Anna to John's proposal, or whether or Lizzie, given I know Lizzie has declared an interest, but I don't know whether that means she's not allowed to speak or whether she is allowed to speak having declared an interest. But I would like to hear a response to John's proposal from one of those two before we go any further, really.
Just to confirm, Lizzie is allowed to speak because it's just a personal interest.
Okay. Anna, would you like to come back first on that point? And then Lizzie?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I suppose it's tricky, isn't it? Because obviously a lot of this work happened in the previous administration, and we had that whole plan of the whole, we're going to be a zero carbon town, and that all happened just before people like John, joined the council. So I don't know. It depends, I suppose, whether we still think that we want to become a zero carbon town by 2030, because if we're going to meet those targets, then we will have to have some wind turbines. And we're not talking about hundreds, we're talking about a maximum of 8 to 10. I mean, if we're looking at the impact on the landscape, roads are much worse in terms of biodiversity, in terms of health, in terms of killing birds, for example. Cats are the second biggest killer. Wind turbines are not. You just have to be very careful that you're not putting it in a migration route. But obviously, we would make sure that that was not the case. And actually, yes, I totally agree with John on the landscape sensitivity analysis. If we could do that study as well and just look at the areas that would be suitable for renewable energy projects, that would be brilliant. And this is a standard procedure that lots of different places, for example, Bath and North East Somerset, have used these consultants, land use consultants, to do a landscape sensitivity analysis. And it's a standard procedure because then it feeds into the local plan, because the national government have said that if you want renewable energy projects like wind and solar farms to happen in your area, you do need to have have marked out areas that are appropriate for this. So that is basically the way to enable those to happen, and also to make sure that the projects are sensitive, are properly planned, and are not just affecting biodiversity or nature that we all love. And I mean, in the context of climate change, it's going to help the future of it's going to help to preserve our beautiful landscape. And in fact, with Brexit and lots of other uncertainty around income for local farmers, actually generating some income for them will actually help to preserve our landscape, as opposed to for more green space to be lost to development, for example.
Thanks, Anna. We'll go to Lizzie and then Maxine, Rob, and then back to John.
So this is just with my FRECO hat on, just to sort of explain really the purpose of the letter. In the sense that, yes, so FRECO wants to go and have conversations with various landowners, and we've already started the research as to who they are, and a little bit of scoping about potential areas of opportunity for wind turbines, because obviously not everywhere works, not everywhere is windy. The support that we're looking for from the town council is really a kind of, it just helps us open the door a little bit. So it helps to make that introduction for us. The outcome of any kind of conversation about wind turbines cannot be predicted. I mean, there have been no wind turbines built probably in the south, onshore in the southwest of England for donkeys, because of planning restrictions that happen at a much higher national level. So this is the longest of long shots. And there's a huge amount of consultation with the local community, the wider community, some of the parishes, Mendip, all sorts, ecology, biodiversity, the RAF, tons of stuff that has to happen, CAA, not necessarily the RAF, that has to happen before a wind turbine can go ahead. So this is helping us really to open that first door. That's really what we're looking for at this stage.
Thanks, Lizzie. Maxine.
Thank you. Am I off mute? Yes, I am. Okay, Anna, I think you've done an amazing amount of work, and I wanted to pipe up as not one of your possibly usual suspects, because I think what you've been doing is amazing. I absolutely do think we should have the last point in, because it's actually in our strategy. It's part of our strategy this year, not just last year, to take the climate emergency very seriously and to support it. We're not saying we're going to build wind turbines, but we are doing what we've said in our strategy, which is supporting what's happening with the climate emergency. So I think that's really important. I'm also really delighted to hear about the Stonebridge, living in Stonebridge as I do, about the cycle, the link up, because I think Stonebridge can be a little bit out of the town sometimes, and I think any way to link it is really good. I'm also delighted to hear about the cycle lessons, because I was thinking about that, how important it is, that everybody's cycling. And I don't know if you've watched it, but I've seen the videos of people falling off their bikes into ditches, and during lockdown. And I think it's really important to have the lessons. And I want to, as Paul knows, I want to start cycling as well to try and get healthy. And this Stonebridge thing is really, really good. So I'm absolutely in support of it all. And I do think that last point should be in. Thank you.
Thanks.
Rob.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back to John's suggestion that we shouldn't have that last point in there. I'm wondering whether he would accept a slight rewording of it, so that sign a letter of introduction to link Frico with landowners to explore opportunities for wind. I think the point here is that we shouldn't be really trying to debate the pros and cons of wind power at this precise moment. That's really not what this paper's about. It's just looking for an introduction, and I think that's been emphasised by both Anna and Lizzie now. So that would be my question to John, whether he'd be happy. I think he did actually say this initially, that he'd be fine with a letter of introduction, but that probably needs clarifying at this point.
Okay, thanks, Rob. John, before I come back to you, I think Rachel's got some questions from some of our panelists around this.
Yes, I've had some comments. Peter McFadden said Anna's report is totally top. So much at the moment that it's great to see actions piling up. Martin Dimmery says it's really reassuring to see Frome Town Council acting so quickly and creatively to put funding from the County Council to such excellent use. Sometimes these funds aren't always taken up or spent wisely because parish or town councils lack imagination or the appropriate staff to take effective action. And Councillor Shane Collins wanted to say, fantastic report, Anna. So good to see town councils doing this. Anything we can do at MDC, just tell us. And John Clark would still like to comment on your report personally, if you're happy for that, Anita.
Okay. Are you happy, John, are you happy if we just hear what John Clark has to say first? Okay. John.
Tried to unmute you. Can you do it yourself?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. It's great to hear this robust debate. Just on the lighter note, I'd love to be where Sarah Williams is actually tonight, because it's getting really humid here. So this paper is really exciting, I think, and it's really challenging. And now is the time, I think, we have to start taking action. If we leave it any longer, the moment will be lost. And I do find it somewhat confusing that suddenly we get all this funding coming forward. So it's really good to identify where it's actually coming from. And it's good, I think, and I particularly urge the need to do the infrastructure plan, because as Anna alluded to, Bridgewater and Taunton had it and they got funding from county. So we do need to get this infrastructure plan in place, but it's great to see real plans being proposed in terms of the Stonebridge thing. I do, however, want to raise a point in terms of finance, There is not going to be enough money to do these things. And I think Frome Council need to think about whether they have funds, capital funds, available to do some of this work. And I think it would be a real benefit to the town and a worthwhile use of the capital reserves that they do have, including perhaps the Saxon Vale Reserve, Regenerative Reserve funds. And I know that may be earmarked for other things, but there's other things in terms of priorities. And I would suggest cycleways and footpath improvement is one of them. So I would like to ask whether consideration be given at some point that Frome themselves as a town council, and it really is amazing what you do or what we do. I don't know if it's we or you, but anyway, when you look at that management report earlier, all the amazing things that a town council does, and we have to be really thankful for all the staff and the councillors for what they do and getting really things done. And I think, you know, enough cannot be said about that. But you know, there are things that could perhaps be looked at, and one of them is about Frome Town Council using some of their quite significant reserves and assets that they have to put money into projects like this, because that will really make a difference to people's lives and make a difference to people's health and make a difference to trying to really address climate change and get zero emissions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Rob and then Lizzie. Oh, Paul, sorry.
I could carry on talking if you want, but I
won't. No.
Are you saying, do you want me to talk first? Or?
Yes, Paul, sorry, and then Lizzie.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd like to kind of back what John said. Thank you for saying that, John. It's been, I mean, Anna's report and everything is absolutely fantastic, and is also really fantastic seeing many more people cycling during lockdown and as we come out of lockdown, and also the support that people in the kind of going forward plan, or whatever it's called, for cycling and walking, etc., etc. It really does feel like there's a kind of groundswell of support for active travel in the town and beyond the town. Well, globally, hopefully, but nationally. However, I think it's really sad shame in a sense that there's not adequate funding for us to be doing these things. You know, we're told that there's three major lifestyle changes you can make if you're serious about addressing your climate impact. There's three major lifestyle changes, and the top ones of those three is leaving the car. You know, walking or cycling is a major lifestyle change you can do to change your impact, improve your health, improve society, etc. And there are many good things come from it. And yet, government, county council, we could say, but I mean, it's mainly government, are not helping us. They're not funding us. You know, they're not really helping us at all. And but we still need to do it. And that's where I reiterate what John said. You know, because nobody else is funding it, we have to do it ourselves. We have to start doing stuff on the ground. We have to start making a difference to people's lives in this way. You know, for me personally, I haven't got a car, and I don't drive very often. So I've kind of made that change, but I really would like to see that made much easier for many more people. Many people would also like to make the change, and they're put off because it's dangerous on the roads. There's too much traffic, it's a lot of pollution. So whatever we can do, however we fund it, I really think we've got to push forward as much as we can on this.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Lizzie.
On a related point, and I was pleased to see in the comments the positive responses particularly from our county councillors. My understanding is that the LC whips that were produced in Taunton and I believe Yeovil, possibly Ridgewater, were actually funded by the county council, not by the towns themselves. I'm happy to be disabused of that, but it does seem that, you know, oh, we're just not getting this. I know there's been a global pandemic, but if we'd been talking about this 6 months ago, would we be having a different conversation? And so, you know, Frome having missed out on that opportunity, Somerset doesn't have the money now, so we have to find it ourselves. And you know, we will and we can, because, you know, we're a good bunch of people who've been, you know, tremendously well looked after by our staff and by previous councillors. But it's frustrating, to say the least, particularly if Somerset have funded a thing in other councils that then is a gateway to further Somerset funding. So I just want to make sure that frustration is aired. And if there is anything, if you can find pockets of change behind the sofa, Somerset County Council head office, then please do send it our way. The other element is also around funding. The note talks about diverting a lot of Anna's, not Anna's budget, but the resilience budget towards these streams of work, because they're not cheap, but they are important. One unlocks other pots of funding. It gives us a strategic approach to cycling and walking across the town. The other unlocks very practical change that people can make on getting from the town centre to the northern side of town. So these seem really strategic, really important things to do, but do we risk hamstringing Anna from doing or other resilience work because so much of her budget or that budget would need to go into these projects? And surely there's a case here for saying, actually, this is what the reserves are for, as John Clark has said. This is what the reserves are for, these sorts of capital works particularly, and infrastructure works like cycle lanes and changes to road layouts, just absolutely feels like the sort of thing that we could be dipping into our reserves for if we can't get support from elsewhere for them. That's all.
Thank you, Lizzie. John, we're finally back to you. Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
Okay, what Paul said, I agree totally. I'm totally behind this proposal on the cycling and walking, 100%. I want to see how we can make it as an avid cyclist. That it's very important. I think there's a lot of added value. It's just unfortunate it gets confused with this other issue. So I'm thinking about what Rob said. But what Anna said, the assumption that our only way to meet a zero carbon target, whatever that means, says a carbon-based life form. It's not just wind. Wind is not just the only thing, the only option out there. There's lots of other options. So I just think I need to underline that. I want it minuted. I think the issue around the wording of the last phrase, I can accept that the wording should change to a letter of introduction, but I can't endorse or provide a letter of support for exploring wind. I'm happy with, if the council wants to introduce, but I'm not exactly sure exactly why this has come in at the end of this report, which was such a good report, except for this last bit, which we haven't really, there's not been a discussion. So that's where I'll leave it there.
So can I just clarify then, John, you're looking to change this recommendation on point 5.
Well, my first point was I wanted to eliminate the last point.
Okay, but now it seems to me as though what you're saying is you'd be happy to approve it if it says to sign the letter of introduction to link Frico with local landowners to explore opportunities for wind. Is that right?
Well, the first thing was my first original proposition.
So John and Anita, what John was proposing was to eliminate recommendation number 5. And so that's John's first choice. And if there's a seconder for that, then you can vote on that.
Okay,
is there a seconder, I suppose, is the question.
Can I ask for a seconder then for John's first point to eliminate point 5 altogether from the recommendation? Is there anyone who would second that?
So I don't see anyone. Could someone just shout if I've got the wrong end of the stick there? Okay, so there isn't a seconder for John's proposal. So
okay, so can we go to the next point then of changing the wording?
That's perfectly reasonable. If anyone would like to
letter of introduction, change support to introduction, for example, that would be the wording I would propose.
Okay, so can I ask for a seconder? Rob, you'd second that? Can I ask for any other support for that? So all in favour of changing the wording to read introduction. Who would support that?
So can you just hang on, because it might not be everyone. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Lizzie, are you allowed to vote in this one?
I don't know, but I don't think John Clark is.
Hang on, I've lost count now, everyone. Hang on. So can you just keep your hands up? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's a majority in favour of changing the wording on the 5th recommendation to introduction.
Okay.
And replace the introduction for support.
Introduction. Okay. So now can I, based on that, could I have a proposer for this recommendation?
So do you want to take all 5, Anita?
If we're happy to take all 5, Barbara, can I have a nod of heads if everybody's happy to take all 5? Yes? Okay.
Can we explore, and I love them. I love the recommendations, of course I do. But I also want to kind of reflect on that budget point. Because we're sort of saying with the first recommendation that the resilience budget, a large chunk of it is going to be dedicated to this work. And I just want to make sure that we're kind of clear on that. And
so would
provide maybe some openness to still looking at the reserves as an option, and also funding from Somerset, Mendip, other sources as well. I know, John, I've got to be optimistic. Come on.
Lizzie, I think you can take it as read that Anna will use that 20,000 as a last resort, and if Mendip and or county or other sources come in, then we will use that first off without any problem at all.
Fantastic.
Sarah might want to come in after me here, but given where we are with we're about nearly £120,000 down on the budget this year at the moment. Hopefully things will get better, but there's absolutely no guarantee or likelihood at the moment that they will. And that is why that we were proposing to use just some of the resilience budget to fund this proposal, because it was opportunistic and we wanted to really get it going if we could. So I wouldn't advise using reserves at this time.
Am I allowed to say anything on this? I mean, basically, yeah, with the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, that is also about £18,000 because we've had some quotes in for that. Obviously, I am going to be looking at Somerset and Mendip and all other funding pots to fund both of these areas of work, so that we can then, keep some money for the resilience overall programme. But it does feel that, particularly with it'd be great if we could do both things, basically, because otherwise it does feel like we might miss the boat again. But obviously it's up to you in terms of, I don't have any other money I can put towards the LC whip, or the cycle lane. But if we were able to put a bit towards either programme, I just think it would just really get the ball rolling, because otherwise in 6 months' time again there'll be another tranche of funding and we'll be saying, oh well, we haven't managed to do the LC whip yet, so we're not in the position to do that. There's no guarantee. I've asked Somerset, I've asked Mendip, they're both saying no, there's not much available, everything's been committed already. They may look at some ad hoc things here and there. In Mendip, there's not a single other, no other town has been funded to do an LC whip. I'm not sure how the system has worked, but yeah, I mean, ideally, I would love to ask for funding for both things, but I don't know. I think I'm not allowed to do that. I don't know.
My advice, councillors, is that we do not use reserves at this time because of such uncertainty.
Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, and then I think we ought to take this on a bit further. Maxine and then Paul. Oh, Rich, sorry. Maxine, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Anita. I just wanted to ask if we've explored all 106 monies, because in the past I've actually got a footpath funded through 106 money, and not just 106 money that might be in the pot now, but future things that are coming up, whether we could direct money towards cycles and footpaths. I know that wouldn't be immediate money, but is that all been explored?
Jane, have you got an angle on that?
Sorry, lost the mute button there for a second. As far as I'm aware, there isn't currently any Section 106 money sitting in any pots that aren't allocated to specific projects or sites. I think the Rich was talking about the Southfield Farm application, for example. Yes, absolutely. We've always got it in the back of our mind when we're looking at applications. If we think there is the potential for Section 106 money, we'll say that in our recommendation. But of all the sites and applications that are coming up at the moment, I would suggest that actually the time frame in which you would be likely to be able to apply for any Section 106 money is a really long way off, and probably talking in excess of a year, etc. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Jane. Paul, you had a quick one?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of really formally propose that we do actually use some reserves for this, even if we don't use a full 20,000 that we need, you know, 10,000 or 15,000. As I said, you know, I accept that, you know, there's financial difficulty because, and COVID is an emergency, but climate change is also an emergency. And what would be more important to spend money on than encouraging people to get out of their cars and cycle more safely, walk safely, get families out and about, etc., etc. So I think this is a really worthwhile thing to actually be pledging reserves for. So I would like to kind of propose that we change that number 1 in the recommendation, and that we use a sum of our reserves.
Sorry, I didn't catch that you were breaking up during your last sentence, Paul.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just proposing really that we do earmark some reserves for either the connecting Stonebridge or the LC whip, so that, you know, as I said, what else is more important in a way at the moment?
Anita, can I just respond to that? As I said, we are approximately £114,000 effectively over budget this year at the moment. We can't come in at the end of the year in debt, so we'll have to use our reserves to pay off that debt, that overdraft, if you like, to come in at a 0 budget. If you use it, how are we going to do it?
Oh, well, I mean, that's useful clarification. So the reserve really will only cover the debt. Is that what you're saying? So we, you know, in a sense, we legally can't use it.
The general reserve is there for emergencies. Now, absolutely a point, Paul, that there is a climate emergency, but what we can't do by the end of the financial year is go, oh well, we can't really afford to come in at budgetary neutral this year because we've spent the reserves on other things. I think it would be really unwise this early in the financial year to be dipping into the general reserve to take these ones forward when we can do it out of existing resilience budget. I mean, at the next Council Matters meeting, Sarah and I will be discussing with you what other budgets we're going to have to cut to be able to come in at 0 at the end of the year. You're proposing something here that is in isolation, and you need to look at the bigger picture. At the moment, I really don't advise that you use the general reserve for this purpose.
Thank you, Paul. Sarah, I saw your hand up there. Before we come to you, Rich, do you mind if Sarah comes in on this point?
Paul, could you just clarify for me that we can't take a new proposal at a meeting? It has to have at least 3 or 4 days notice to the public. So if you change the proposal about where funds are coming from, I think it has to be at a next meeting, because the proposal that Hannah put forward was that the budget would come from her current, the funds would come from her current budget.
If councillors don't take my advice, and that is certainly your prerogative, we can change that recommendation to take it out of the general reserve, Sarah. My advice is that you don't, though.
Okay, Rich. Thank you, Paul.
Totally in support of all the recommendations. Just for the record, I am a shareholder of Frico.
Okay, thank you. Ali, you had a quick point.
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Paul, really, and I certainly wouldn't be able to make a decision with my knowledge at the moment about the budget, and that isn't what I think we should be deciding on tonight at all. We should just go with the recommendation and talk about this further, maybe at the Council Matters.
Okay. So I think we're back to the recommendation now, and it seems to me that we're asking for approval on this recommendation on all 5 points, as long as we change the wording in point 5 to say sign the letter of introduction rather than support. Yeah, so can I have a proposer for that recommendation, please? John, you're willing to propose. Andy, you're going to second. And can we have a show of hands, please?
That's unanimous.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see if we can whiz through these next three a bit quickly. We're on 9:30 already, folks, so it's a late one tonight, I'm sorry. Agenda item 7 for decision. So this is to agree S106 funds for a natural flood management project upstream of Warbridge. I think you're on this one, Chris.
Thank you, Anita. Evening, everybody. So yeah, it's quite a short and matter-of-fact report because the Town Council's role in this, although we are part of the Somerset Frome project, actually our role tonight, or your role, sorry, is to okay or not that Section 106 funds can be applied for by the Somerset Frome Partnership to develop these projects a little further. This is the next step in a project that we've been involved with. I've sat in some meetings, Rich has sat in a few more than that. It's to do with natural flood management, which would benefit the town. The project has been put together, hopefully, as you'll have seen from the appendices, the report, by an awful lot of very expert, very informed and appropriate organisations. We'd have no other project to put forward using this Section 106 money. So hopefully quite a straightforward decision, but happy to answer any questions I can, although I may not be able to necessarily give detail on the project itself.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any questions? Rich?
Second what Chris said, basically that Section 106 money has to be used on flood prevention measures. There's about £400,000 sitting there. I know we've wangled some for the bridge project, but the rest of it is just sitting there. And it's I think it's with county at the moment or Environment Agency. It's never going to get spent unless we push the envelope out. So you know, it really needs spending on something good. And I think natural flood measures is as good as we're going to get.
Great.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? I can't see all the hands, Paul. Can you see any other questions?
I can't see any more.
Okay, so it's the recommendation then is for us to approve the use of these S106 funds for Southfield Farm for the project as described by the Somerset Frome Partnership. Can I have a proposer, please? Rob, and seconder, Rich, and all in favour?
And that's unanimous.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Agenda. Sorry?
Did you want me to just do the next one as well?
Yes, please. This is adopting the River Frome's 2020 to 2030 strategy for the river.
Yeah, so just very, very quick introduction. At the annual town meeting last time out, Simon Keys, on behalf of the Friends group, put together a brilliant presentation, and there was, I think, near unanimous enthusiasm to formally adopt it at council. That is what this report recommends. I've put together a start of a table that just shows kind of how important it will be, and that it's going to be a partnership that we work on for the 10 years of the strategy. So again, happy to answer any questions, but I think Simon's presentation last time out probably did most of that for me.
Absolutely. Are there any questions before we go on from anyone? No? Okay, so the recommendation is A, that we formally adopt the strategy, and B, that we note the list of riverside spaces that we look after and the tables providing early information about projects likely to come from adopting the strategy. Could I have a proposer, please? John. Seconder, Sheila. Thank you. All in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. And then item number 9 is to resume the calendar of meetings from 2020 to 21 to revert back to the old calendar system. I think, Laura, are you doing this?
Yep, so it's just obviously we've got better at doing virtual council meetings. There's lots and lots to discuss at council, as tonight proves. So it seemed quite timely to go back to the committee system. So it just reinstates the calendar of meetings that was approved back in January. We did today, I sent to all councillors who had sight of this beforehand, a couple of revisions as we found that we were getting a bit too close to the next council matters meeting. So there would have been a council matters meeting on the 1st of July. That's no longer happening. We've instead commandeered the 15th of July council meeting. The council meeting will then be on the 9th of September, which would have been council matters, and the 23rd of September will now be council matters. Are you with me? So just some very simple changes, but keeps the actual momentum of meetings. And then obviously the only other thing is to mention that the town matters meetings would then start from 7:15 rather than our usual 7 p.m. So just something to mark your calendars with. But of course I will put all this information on the website, and councillors, I will send out individual calendar invites so you've all got it in your diaries.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions on that before we can take a vote? Okay, so the recommendation is to Rob, sorry.
It would just be really helpful, Laura, if you could stick in the meetings with the other, I forget what they call it.
Yeah. So hopefully tomorrow you should have a very comprehensive calendar sent to councillors that includes tag meetings, room councillor forum meetings, councillor Q&A meetings, committees, council meetings, etc., plus calendar invites if I can get it all in.
I don't think we're going to have time for lunch, Laura, are you, tomorrow?
Somewhere.
Any more questions from anyone? Okay, so the recommendation is to agree to resume the calendar of meetings for 2021 and agree the start time of Time Matters Committee meetings to be 7:15. Can I have a proposal? Laura,
sorry, Paul, do we need to add in a recommendation to okay the revisions to the July and September meetings, or is that okay?
I think that's fine, Laura, because we've sent councillors out the revised version today.
Right.
So
thank you.
Okay, so could I have a proposer, please? Mark and Max, seconder, and all in favour?
that's unanimous.
Yippee. And item number 10, which is the health and safety update. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah, so typically this is presented at the Council Matters Committees, obviously because the other committees had been suspended for a little bit. You hadn't had a health and safety update for 4 months, and I thought you might all be missing one. So it is, as the report suggests, the kind of fairly obvious point is we have been spending as an organisation an awful lot of time looking to make obviously our staff safe, but also the volunteers, and to try our best to relay the messages coming from government to keep the town safe as well. So again, happy to answer any questions, but I think probably fairly straightforward.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any questions on this report? I take it that's a no. So thank you very much, everyone. I think that probably brings us to a conclusion, unless anyone's got anything they have a burning desire to ask or comment on. No hands? Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for taking your time tonight. Really appreciate it. I know it was a long one. Apologies for that, but it was a big agenda tonight. And hopefully now that Council Matters and Time Matters are going to be resurrected, we can keep these a little bit shorter in the future. But have a good night, the rest of it. Enjoy your gin and tonic if you're going for one. And see you next time. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hello all.
Good. Well done. Blimey.
Have we
was a bit
still
of a
got any,
marathon.
we got some attendees.
Oh, have we?
Oh yeah, Becky.
Becky's still here. Can we
I'm
make
just
her
letting Becky talk. Sorry, bye Shane.
Do you remember in Roald Dahl's The Witches, when the witches all met up and they closed the door and they were allowed to take their masks off?
Freak me out, no end.
You're live on YouTube, Paul.
Thanks, Becky.